Good morning. If you were to witness injustice, what would your reaction be? If you see someone get hurt or judged unfairly, typically we have an emotional response. I was reading a really good article, and it was called The Neurobiological Mechanisms of Responding to Injustice. And it was a great article because what it did is it concluded with showing us that we have the same reaction as if I was the victim of an injustice or I witnessed another victim of injustice. And the study was great because it showed that we have a physiological response. It wasn't just emotional reactions. There would be hormones and neurotransmitters that would take place and be released within our body. And different parts of our brain would light up depending on what kind of injustice you would witness. See, that just goes to show how wonderfully we are created, that we, like God, have a reaction to when we see some type of injustice. And it's not just an emotional one, it's also from our body. It's a physiological response. Now, Psalm 82 is not going to go over those hormones or any of those neurotransmitters being released within your body. But what Psalm 82 is a great reminder that God will judge the wicked who treats others unfairly. Let's look at Psalm 82. God presides in the great assembly. He renders judgment among the gods. We begin here with a rebuke or warning, right? But Yahweh is presiding. That's what it says in the beginning. God presides over these little g gods that you see later in that first verse there. And the little g gods have multiple meanings throughout the Bible. But here it's speaking to those officials that would have been elected or judges of that time that were called to protect those that were more vulnerable. Now you would have seen these gods used in Exodus or 1 Samuel when the Hebrew slaves would go to these little g, these officials, these little g gods, when their time was up, their 6-year time was up, but they wanted to remain in service with that same master. They would go to those little g gods. But here we're going to see that these little g gods aren't doing what they were called to do. Verse 2. How long will you defend the unjust and show partiality to the wicked? They're failing at what they are called to do. What they're called to do, we'll see in the following verses. Defend the weak and the fatherless. Uphold the cause of the poor and the oppressed. Rescue the weak and the needy. Deliver them from the hands of the wicked. The gods, little g, knowing nothing, they understand nothing. They walk about in darkness. All of the foundations of the earth are shaken. See, I think that's key in verse 5 there, is when they say they walk about in darkness. These little g gods are walking in darkness. They're not walking in the light. They're not walking in the pathway with God. And then it'll go on to say in verse 6, I said, you are gods, you are all sons of the Most High, but you will die like mere mortals. You will fall like every other ruler. See, the judges and rulers, those little g gods, would have been high in status, but what we see here in these verses is that their status is being lowered, and they're being reminded that they will also face death. And when they face death, they also will face the judgment of the Yahweh who presides over these little g gods. The judgment will come for those that are not doing what they are called to do, to uphold God's kingdom's values. And it ends with verse 8. Rise up, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your inheritance. Rise up. They're asking him to right what is wrong. See, what upsets God is not necessarily the political or theological issues that you can see debates going back and forth over the table at dinner time or something like that. It's the treatment of others. We see that here in the psalm. It's all about how you're treating others, especially to those that are most vulnerable. It's clear in this psalm that God, he acts unfailingly. He's committed to justice for the most vulnerable, and that those that act as these small gods, that they will be condemned one day because of their failures.